You see a title like this, "Unfortunately, coding is this simple," and it kind of makes you scratch your head, right? I mean, how can something be unfortunately simple? Well, it turns out the biggest thing holding people back from becoming a developer, it isn't about being some kind of genius. Nope, it's about something way more fundamental.
So, to get a handle on this, let's look at a real-world example. Picture this, a pretty intense 4-month coding program. 90 students have been grinding away, learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, the works. And now, it's time for the final exam. This is the moment of truth, where all that theory is supposed to turn into actual, working code.
And wow, the results are just staggering. Out of all 90 students, only a single person managed to solve more than half the problems. Only 5 got more than 20% right. The vast majority? They couldn't even really get started. Now, this isn't just about a hard test. This is a snapshot of the real world, where a tiny fraction, like less than 10%, can actually do the job. So what is going on here? Is coding just this impossible mountain to climb? Well, the argument here is no. This is not a failure of brains. It's a failure of accountability. It's about the simple, boring, but absolutely crucial discipline of just showing up and doing the work, day in and day out.
And that leads us right into this really important idea, the pretender problem. This is the first and honestly the biggest hurdle that trips up most people who are trying to break into tech.
So who is this pretender? Well, you probably know the type. It's the person who is in love with the idea of being a developer. The title, the cool startup t-shirts, calling themselves a full-stack dev. They're great at posting their course certificates online, but when it's time to actually sit down and struggle through a tough bug, suddenly there's a new JavaScript framework they just have to check out.
This quote just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Loving the destination, but absolutely hating the road to get there. And look, this mindset is super common, but it's also incredibly dangerous if you're serious about building a real career.
Because here's the thing, you aren't really fooling anyone but yourself. And deep down you know it. You know you don't have that solid foundation. So when you get faced with a real challenge at a real job, that house of cards comes tumbling down. Your confidence shatters. And what happens next? You end up quitting tech altogether.
Okay, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about the people who do make it. What separates that top 5%? It all comes down to their mindset and their strategy, right from the very beginning.
Let's break this down. You've got 2 basic paths. On the right, you have the approach a lot of people from fancy schools take. They're all about maximizing that first salary, leaning on their school's brand and their IQ. But for pretty much everyone else, the winning play is over on the left. The goal isn't the biggest paycheck on day one. It's about getting your foot in the door, period. It's about finding a great team to learn from and just soaking up every bit of real-world experience you can.
And it all boils down to this simple truth. Money follows value, and value follows experience. You just can't demand a huge salary if you can't provide huge value, and you can't provide that value without actually doing the work first. It's a logical progression, and yet so many people try to skip a step. The money will come, I promise, but it comes after you've become valuable.
And here is the really encouraging part. It truly doesn't matter where you start. So what if someone from a big-name university starts with a higher salary? That gap is completely closable. If you just put your head down and focus on delivering real value, you can catch up, and you can do it way faster than you think, sometimes in just a year or 2.
So how do you build that value? How do you get that experience? Well, it's all about developing what the source calls muscle memory in your coding.
Here's your game plan. First, stop looking for the quick hack or the magic shortcut. They don't exist. Second, you have to embrace the grind. You have to embrace repetition. Code a sign-up form 100 times if you need to. Do it until recognizing the patterns is as natural as breathing. Third, follow what you're actually curious about. Build stuff that genuinely challenges you. And finally, you have to commit. Give yourself a solid 6 to 8 months of real, focused, deep work. That's what it takes to build a foundation that won't crack.
And of course, we've got to talk about AI. It's an amazing tool, but how you use it is everything. Think of AI as your personal tutor. You're stuck on a concept? Ask it to explain it to you in 5 different ways. That's fantastic, but don't use it as a slave to just pump out code for you. The second you do that, you're robbing yourself of the most important part of learning, the struggle. That's where the muscle memory actually gets built.
All right, so let's say you've done the work. You've built that muscle memory. Now comes the final boss, the job interview. Let's go through some of the most common mistakes that can totally sink your chances.
First up, this is a huge red flag for any interviewer. oh, I can learn that in a couple of days. Companies are not hiring your potential to learn something quickly. They are hiring the skills and the experience you have right now. They need someone who can come in and start contributing, not a student who needs more training.
Oh man, this is another one. Trying to justify using AI in an interview because I'd use it on the job. Look, the interview isn't about just getting the right answer. It's about you showing your fundamental skills, your problem-solving process. If you have to lean on AI for a basic problem, it shows you don't actually have that core ability they're trying to test for.
And this one, look, everyone gets nervous. It's totally normal, but it can't be an excuse for not being able to perform at all. Real confidence, the kind that shines through even when you're nervous, comes from experience. If you're fumbling basic questions, it signals to the interviewer that you just haven't put in enough practice reps. It all comes back to that muscle memory.
And here are a few other quick landmines to avoid. First, don't get obsessed with getting a remote job right out of the gate. That in-person mentorship when you're starting out is absolutely priceless. Second, don't wait until the very end of the process to surprise them with a huge salary demand. And last, remember that your first job offer is just that. It's the first one. It is not the final word on your entire career.
You know, this is probably the best analogy for it. Think of your first couple of years in tech like a doctor's residency. Is a resident making the big bucks? No. They're there to learn, to see everything, to get their hands dirty. They're maximizing their experience because they know that's what gives them leverage later on. That's the mindset.
So let's just wrap it all up with the single most important idea from all of this. Success in this field doesn't go to the smartest person in the room, it goes to the most consistent person. It goes to the person who does the simple, sometimes tedious, but necessary work every single day. So the only real question you have to ask yourself is, are you showing up?